Do not be discouraged by the opinions of others. Don't be discouraged if someone tells you you don't have the right look or the right sound or the right voice or this isn't the right fit for you, then fine, and you go somewhere else and you keep trying, You have to work so hard. But I think the hardest work is to remain true to yourself when you're told no so many times.
Hi and welcome back. In this video, we're just going to be setting up our project that we're going to be creating in this section. I've created a folder here in my documents, and the only thing you need is to create a folder for your project, and then remember where the folder is so that you can find it in your terminal. Once you've created a folder for your project, let's go into the terminal and create our environment using Pipenv. Okay, once you are in your terminal, let's go into this directory. Remember, on Unix systems like Mac OS X and Linux, we're going to do cd and then find the folder. In Windows, you're going to do change directory and then you're going to find the folder like C / wherever the folder is. Here, the folder is in my documents to cloud the projects, your first Flask app. So we're going to cd into that. And then we're going to use Pipenv to install Flask. Flask is the library we're going to be using in this section to create our website. It's a really lightweight library. We're going to learn a lot about how it works throughout the section. Once you do Pipenv install Flask, make sure that it is creating a virtual environment using the correct version of Python. In this case, Python 3.7. I know you can see that very well, but using Python 3.7 there. 3.6 is fine, 3.5, just don't go under 3. Just because of some of the syntax we're going to be using. Once it's installed, you'll have a virtual environment created as well. You know this already, Pipenv creates a virtual environment for you. Remembering this virtual environment is going to be very important because we're going to need to give it to PyCharm in order for PyCharm to use the correct Python version. Okay. So now that we've got this created, we've got, if we do ls or dir in Windows, we've got a pip file and that pip file.lock. Remember, the pip file gives us what libraries we're installing. Pip file.lock gives us a bit of security and also installs the correct versions. If we share both with other people, then they'll be able to install exactly the same versions that we installed when we set up the project. Now that we've got this, again, remember the location of this virtual environment, and let's go over to PyCharm to create our new project. Once you've opened PyCharm, you'll see a window like this. Just create a new project, and here, make sure to select the location of your project. So in my case, this is in my documents. Teclado projects, your first Flask app. Make sure to select this folder, and then in the interpreter, let's go and find the virtual environment that was created for us by Pipenv. Notice when I open this here, I get a lot of virtual environments in various different places. We're going to need to go and add a local virtual environment and then find the virtual environment that we had before. So going back over to the terminal, in my case, this is in /users/jslvtr.local and so forth. So PyCharm allows you to copy this and then just put it in here in the path. This is the virtual environment. Then you're going to open it up, find the bin folder, and find Python. Okay, make sure to select Python inside the bin folder, and then press OK. And now PyCharm knows that this is the Python version you want to use. It's going to allow you to use Python 3.7 syntax. It's going to use the packages that are installed in this interpreter and not in the system Python. Then we can press create, and it will ask us whether we want to create a project from existing sources. That's because we've got the pip file and the pip file.lock in there already, and we're going to say yes. And then we're going to get our new project that has our two files there already. Whenever you want to install new libraries, now you must not go through, or you could go through the PyCharm settings here, this thing here, but I'd recommend you go through the Pipenv settings using the terminal. That's because this is going to install something directly in the virtual environment, but it's not going to update your pip file. So if you want to install more things, you can go through PyCharm, but you probably want to go through the terminal. Just do pipenv install whatever else you need. For this project, we're not going to need anything else, so Flask is the only thing we need, and we've got that now. If you create a new Python file and you call it app.py, you should be able to do from Flask import Flask. Okay, if this doesn't give you any errors, then you're good to go. If this gives you any errors, just check your settings, check your pip file, make sure everything's set up correctly. It's possible that either something wasn't installed correctly, in which case your pip file will not show Flask, or it's possible that you're not using the correct virtual environment, in which case you want to go back and make sure to select the correct virtual environment here, or add a local virtual environment and find the correct one. Okay? Make sure that Flask is here and that you can import Flask, and if once that's all ready, you're good to continue into the next video where we're going to be implementing our first web application. I'll see you there.
Do not compare yourself to anyone's life that you see on social media, because you're seeing the showreel of highlights. Whether you call it a highlight or a carefully cultivated, showreel of how their life looks. You're not seeing the behind the scenes. You're not seeing the other moments.
Hi and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be implementing our first Flask application. It's not going to be a very large application, but it's going to give us a taste of how Flask works. Now that we've imported the Flask class here from the Flask module, we're ready to start. The first thing we have to do is to use that class to create our Flask app. And every Flask app must have a unique name. We can do something like app equals Flask and then dunder name. The reason why I'm using dunder name here is just because that's always going to be unique for an application. You know that the file you run has a name of main, and all the other files are going to have different names, so there's no chance of us creating another Flask app with the same name throughout our entire application by mistake. In this project, we're only going to be creating a single Flask app, but this is important anyway. Make sure to have a unique name there. Also, when you are seeing logs and things like that, you may want to see there the name of the Flask app, and it can be helpful to know that this is the main file that you ran. The next thing we want to do is define the first URL of our application. Remember, this is going to be a web application, which means users are going to be accessing this application using their browsers like Google Chrome or Internet Explorer. So the first thing we have to do is say, what happens when somebody arrives at our page? What happens when somebody tells the browser to send us a request for data? What do we do? So the first thing we do is we use a decorator to say app.route, and then we're going to give this / there. The / on any page is always the home page. We're going to see this in action in just a moment. Then we're going to do def home, for example, defining a function. And as you know, this decorator here is going to act on this function here. So the function name doesn't really matter. All that matters is that we've got the right decorator on top. This function is going to run when the user visits this route. And for now, it's just going to return hello world. Okay? So what's going to happen when a user visits our homepage is they're going to be received with the words hello world. The connection goes as follows. The user is going to type our website into their browser, and the browser is going to send us a request. It's going to say, hey, I want the homepage. Then we're going to run this home function, and Flask is going to take care of, communicating with the browser and sending information over the internet and so forth. And at the end, this function is going to return hello world, and that's where we're going to send the browser as data to display on the web page. So the browser is then going to show that to the user, the words hello world. Finally, we have to run our app to start the server that allows Flask to receive connections. The way we're going to do that is, of course, if name is main, so that we only run this when we actually want to run it as opposed to when we import the file. which again, we're not going to do in this section, but nonetheless is something you may want to do in the future. All we do is, apologies by that by the way, app.run debug is true. This starts running our app, and we can give it this debug flag, which is just here for development purposes, but it just means that we're going to get a few more informations if an error happens. So a couple of more bits of information if something does go wrong. We don't foresee anything going wrong with this app, but nonetheless, it's always a good thing to have here when you are developing. Once you share this with your users, you may want to turn this off. Okay, so that's it. This is our first Flask endpoint. Now we can right-click app.py and run it. And as you can see, we get something from Flask. We get that it's running. We get the URL in which it is running, the address. And then, we get some debugging information here because we've used debug is true. This here is the address of the application. When we send a request to this application, it's going to be interacting with this Flask app. When we send the request to this address, it's going to be interacting with this Flask app, and the Flask app can then choose to return some information. Let's go over to Chrome and access this URL. I've accessed the URL here with Chrome, and as you can see, we get the words hello world. I know they're a bit small there. We're going to look at how you can style things much later on, but this is what the application has returned. So going back to PyCharm, you can see that we get some more information now on these logs. We get that on this date, there was a request being made to the home page. This is the protocol used to make the request. It's just a version of, the way that browsers communicate with servers, HTTP 1.1. You can see that this is a GET request. And all that means is a particular type of request. There are various types. We're going to be exploring other types throughout the section. A GET request, which is what a browser sends when they access a page, just asks the server to send some information. It doesn't ask the server to, make changes or add things to a database, things like that. There are other types of requests for that. And then we also see that the code that the server returned is a 200, which means okay, means everything's fine, there were no errors or anything happened that was incorrect. This log here, if you can see that, means that everything's good. Sometimes you may see more than one log, and that's because some browsers do multiple requests for a single page, like Safari can do that sometimes. Don't worry about it. If you can see these logs, even if you see a couple of them, this is good. This means your server is running, and we've created our first endpoint. This here is known as a root or an endpoint, and they essentially mean the same thing, and this here is essentially the address of the root. A single /, if we go back to Chrome, just means nothing. But we can access other pages by doing, as you've probably seen in other sites, something like posts or something. So you can see we've got a few test URLs here that I've been accessing already, because what we're going to be creating in this section is a blogging application, so we're going to be looking at various different posts. If you access the URL here with a single / at the end, it's just going to take you to the same page you're already at. And by going back to PyCharm, we can see that there's another log that appeared here. All I wanted to say here is the / is the home page, but we can add roots for other things. Anyway, that's it for this video. I wanted to show you how to go about this, and I'll see you on the next one where we're going to look at some more complex Flask. I'll see you there.
Don't give up on yourself. Don't let anyone draw you down. There'll be bad days. Yeah? Everybody has bad days. People will pull you down. Your own rejections may make you feel bad. But if you don't believe in yourself, then nobody else.
Hi and welcome back. In this video, we're going to look at how to return some more information by adding another endpoint and making it give us something back. In this section, we're going to be building a posts application, like a blogging app, but simpler. It's just going to store posts that we write, and we're going to be able to access different posts by using endpoints. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create some test data just because we're going to start by being able to read posts, and then we're going to look at writing posts afterwards. In order to be able to read a post, of course, we need some posts in order to be able to read them. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to do something like this. Just typing it out. What you've got here is posts variable is a global variable, and it is a dictionary. A dictionary which maps 0 to content. Okay. Now, this 0 here is the post ID. That's a unique identifier for each post. Because we only have one post, that's going to start at 0, but then it's going to go up to 1 and then 2 and so forth as we add more posts. In this video though, we're only going to be able to read this post. In order to do that, we are going to create another endpoint. And in this endpoint, we're going to do app.route or route. I never know how to say that. Int post ID there. What this is doing now is this is going to define another route, and it's going to associate it with this function here. But as you can see, there's a bit of a strange bit of syntax here. These crocodile clips, this int, the colon, and post ID. What this is going to do is this will be replaced by an integer, a number, which is the post ID. So for example, when a user sends a request and they try to access /post/0, this 0 will replace this entire thing. This is some Flask unique syntax which will allow the 0 to replace this entire thing, and then post ID will be passed to our function as post ID, and that parameter there. Now we'll have access to post ID inside the function in order to retrieve it from our dictionary. If we wanted to retrieve this post from the dictionary, all we have to do is posts.get post ID. We've seen this sort of syntax before. All it does is it tries to get from the dictionary something with this key, and if it fails, it will return none. Okay, so all we're doing is getting, for example, post ID 0 from this dictionary, which is going to give us this other dictionary, and that is going to go into post. Then we can return a more complex string, like for example, post title. Content is going to be post content. Something like this. Nothing terribly complicated. All that's happening here is we're retrieving the post from our dictionary, and then we're returning a string that contains the title and the content, just so somebody that requests it can read the post. Once again, and you should get accustomed to doing this when you're developing larger applications, as we're going to be doing in this section, make sure to press play and test it out. So all we have to do is go over back to Chrome, run the application. As you can see, nothing changes with the hello world, but now we can access post 0. And there you have some extra content. Post hello world, and the content is, this is my first blog post. What we've learned now is how to use this in-memory database, this dictionary here that's acting as an in-memory database, and return some content through a browser to a user. You can see how if we put this out there in a server that a lot of people could access, they could all now access this address by using their computers all over the internet. Of course, returning this simple string and also just having a single post inside our code is not terribly useful. If we add in a database though, and we add the ability to create new posts, suddenly this becomes a lot more useful. That's it for this video. I just wanted to show you how to return existing information. We're going to look at how we can style this a little bit better by using HTML in the next video. I'll see you there.
Remember, however many times you go wrong, no matter how many times you fail, despair, feel like this world is against you, in the words of Bob Marley, at the end, everything's gonna be all right.
Hi and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be creating our first HTML file and returning that to our users instead of a simple string. When you create a Flask app, Flask starts looking for a templates folder. So we're going to create a new directory and call it templates. And that has to be beside app.py, so in the same folder as app.py is. Okay, notice how these are both in the same folder. Now, you can tell app.py, your Flask app, to return some HTML file that is inside this templates folder. First of all, we're going to create our HTML file, and then we're going to return it. So we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it post.html, for example. This can contain any HTML you want. So let's start with some basic HTML. All HTML has to have a doc type of HTML. This says that it is HTML5. And then you can have a head and a body. And in the body, you can have your HTML content. So this is essentially the basic HTML structure. Tells the browser receiving the file that this is an HTML file. And then it has the HTML content inside it. There's a head, which can include things like styles and JavaScript and things like that. Things the user's not going to see, but that can change the page. And in the body is the things the user will see. So here in the body, we can put, for example, h1, hello world. And then we can have a p tag, which is a paragraph tag saying like, this is my first post, for example. Now we've got this post.html file, we can go back to app.py and tell our endpoint here, this root, to render that template and return it to the user. We're going to have to import something else from Flask. We're going to do from Flask import Flask, comma, render template. And then instead of returning this string here, we're going to return render template of post.html. Okay, notice how we've not used our post variable at all yet. We're going to do that in just a moment. For now, let's run the app and make sure that this is all working. So the app all runs fine. And if we go over to the URL we had before and we refresh the page, now you can see that it looks a little bit different. We've now got a heading, which is this larger bit of text that says hello world. And we've got, this is my first post in a paragraph. This is looking a bit better because now this is an HTML file as opposed to just a string that's coming through from our server. Going back to PyCharm, now we can stop the app, hide it away, and go back to here. And now we'll use our post to make sure that we're displaying this information in our page instead of the static contents of our HTML page. Inside an HTML page that is rendered with Flask, we can actually include variables. For example, we can include post title. And notice how I've used double curly braces. Then I've used this as if it were a dictionary, and then I've done the two closing curly braces. Jinja 2 is built upon Python and it has a lot of the same syntax. So what we're doing here is we're going to pass this template a dictionary called post, and the template is going to be able to replace this for whatever it is that this evaluates to, the post title most likely. Similarly here, post content. Now this template is going to look at the post variable and try to get the title and the content from it in order to render the template with those. But of course, we must give it the post variable that it's going to look for. So inside render template, after the template name, we can pass in named arguments like so. This post named argument will become this post here. And this post here is, of course, the value of the argument, which is what we've retrieved from our in-memory database. To make things simpler, we could just delete that and put it there. That way we're saying the post in the template is going to be this value, post.get of post ID. And what's going to happen is we're going to retrieve that from our database. We're going to pass it to the template with the name post. The template can then use this name inside it to access properties and replace content. Let's run the app again. By the way, as an aside, remember to stop your app every time you want to do something else. Flask does not work well if you forget to stop the app. Okay? just remember to stop it. I've not mentioned this before, my apologies. Remember to stop your app after every time you want to restart it, because if not, it won't let you, because the app is using this number 5000 for communication. And if you try to start the app twice, both will try to use the same number to communicate, and they won't like that. So make sure to stop your app every time and then restart it. Now going back to Chrome, we can refresh the page and notice how it's going to change very slightly. Now it says, this is my first blog post, as opposed this is my first post, what it said before. That's because this content now is coming from here, our dictionary. Stopping the app again and hiding that. This is because here we are now passing this information to the template so that it can render it before sending it back to the browser. This is really important because now we can embed things into a template, make it look not only nice, but also make it include the information we want from our Python programs. Over the next few videos, we're going to look at extending this functionality and also, of course, adding new posts so that the program can become more and more dynamic. And I'll see you on the next video.
The first thing is to be honest with yourself. You can never have an impact on society if you have not changed yourself.
And welcome back. In this video, we're going to look at adding error pages. If we run our app and we go back to Chrome, we can refresh and see that this still works. But if we change this to post number 1, for example, it does not. It just sort of breaks and nothing really happens. What we're seeing here is that there is no content to be put in here in the template. So instead of, getting a page that says we can't find this post, what we're getting is nothing. This is not great, so let's stop our app. Remember to stop your app every time and hide this away. And what we're going to do is, if we can't find the post in our database, which is our dictionary here, we're going to return a different template, which is going to be an error page or a not found page. So again, we're going to extract this back to a variable, just because we need to use it in multiple places now. We're going to say post is that. And if not post, remember post will be none if it's not found, because the get method returns none if it wasn't found in the dictionary. So post will evaluate to true if it is something and to false if it is none. Not false will be true. So then we will run this if statement. So if the post was not found, we will run the if statement. Just going to write a wee comment here to make this a bit clearer. Post will be none if not found. Not none evaluates to true, because none evaluates to false. And as you know, an if statement only runs when the condition here is true. So if this was not found, we want to run return render template. And we're going to do a 404.html page. And then we're going to pass it in a message to say something like, a post with ID, post ID, was not found. Okay. And of course down here, post is going to be equal to post, which is what we created up here. Notice that there is a gray squiggly line. That's because the variable has the same name as the function. Not a great convention. This is my bad. I don't recommend naming the function and the variables the same way, but it's normally fine. It's only not fine if you want to call this function from within your code, which would be a bit of a strange thing to do. So this is okay. Maybe not the best idea. Python doesn't like it very much, but it still works. So what we got here is, if the post was not found, we're going to return this other template. And we're going to give it this variable that the template can use. So let's go into our templates and create a new HTML file, which we're going to call 404.html. Notice how when you create a new HTML file, this is already all pre-filled for you. So you can keep some of this, like at the title of the page and so forth, or you can just delete it. And we're going to add in our body here what we want the page to return. It's going to be h1, and we're going to say 404 post not found. And then inside a p tag, we're going to put our message. Our message, remember, is the variable we passed in that is going to get replaced by a post with ID, post ID was not found. So make sure that you've stopped running your app earlier. We can run it again. Go back to Chrome, refresh this page that didn't return anything before, and now you can see we get a nice 404 post not found, and then it says a post with ID 1 was not found. If we go back to post 0, we get our post contents. So this is great. We're now dealing with user input in a very nice way. If we couldn't do what they needed, we can return a message that is appropriate, as opposed to nothing, or potentially an error message. Again, remember to stop your app and minimize that. And now we're going to look at a couple improvements to this multi-template. As you can see, both our pages, 404 and post, have essentially the same structure. They've got this doc type, they've got this HTML, an empty head, a body, and the only difference between the two, other than the indentation, is this. The post has this h1 and this p tag with this post title and content, and the 404 has an h1 and a p tag with a different message entirely. Jinja 2, which is the engine that's driving this templating, does have support for, this sort of inheritance. So we can make a base template that will contain all of this body and HTML, and then we can make these two child templates that only include this content here. That way we'll have a bit less duplicated content. Let's go ahead, right-click our templates, and create a new file. I'm going to call this file base.jinja2. Now the reason I'm going for Jinja2 and not HTML here is because in some editors, not in PyCharm Community Edition, but in some editors, you'll get a bit better syntax highlighting if you use .jinja2. If you are using PyCharm Community Edition, I advise you stick with .html, just because you're going to get slightly nicer highlighting. If you're using other editors, I recommend you use .jinja2 and you install any packages you need in order to get the syntax highlighting to work. Okay? In this editor, you're not going to see syntax highlighting, but this is the best thing to do if you're using a different editor that does support that. Optionally, if you're using PyCharm Professional Edition, which is not free, you'll also get nice syntax highlighting with this. So as part of this, creating this superclass, per se, super template, we're going to be changing over to Jinja2. The first thing we want to do is to say, what is in a base template? Well, in a base template, you've got essentially all of this. But you don't want the content. You want this content, this h1 tag and the p tags, to come from the children. So instead, in Jinja2, now we can use this syntax to say block content. And down here, end block. As you can see, there is a opening curly brace and a percent symbol. Then we've got block content and a percent symbol and a closing brace. Then we've got, some content in here if we want. And at the end, we've got this end block set of tags. You can put any content you want here. But more interestingly, you can copy this and put it into 404.html. Now, the 404.html tag can have its content here, and it will be replaced for this stuff in base.jinja2. So I'm going to undo that and just put it up here, just so I can then copy this, put it in there, and get rid of that. As you can see, 404.html now looks much simpler. And if we go over to post.html, we can do the same. So we can go and copy this, paste it in here, copy this, paste it in here, make sure to fix the indentation. Now post.html also looks a bit simpler. These pages are just children of base.jinja2. They don't need all the duplicate code for the HTML and, head tags, body tags, because the content here will be injected into this block that we've defined at base.jinja2. Of course, the million-dollar question is, how do they know they are children of that? We've not said it anywhere. Indeed, we have to say that. So we'll say extends base.ginger2. We'll copy that and put it in post as well. Make sure to not forget that. Now these children are actually extending base.ginger2. When we render this template using Flask, the first thing it'll do, is it'll go and extend Ginger2. So all the scaffolding from base.ginger2 is going to be applied to this template, and this block of content is going to replace this block of content here. So we're going to get a nice HTML file without the bloat and the duplication. So that's good. As part of this, again, we're going to migrate to .ginger2 just to make it clear that these templates are Ginger2 templates and not HTML only templates. So I'm going to rename these by right-clicking them, go to refactor and rename, and change that to Ginger2. We're going to lose the syntax highlighting, which is not great in this editor. So again, if you are using PyCharm Community Edition like I am, don't do this. Stick to HTML. It may be slightly easier. You won't get syntax highlighting for Ginger, but you will get syntax highlighting for HTML. If you're using a different editor though, feel free to move over to Ginger2 and install whatever it is you need to install to get the syntax highlighting. It's up to you. It doesn't really matter to Python at all. Now, instead of HTML here in these templates, make sure to use .ginger2. Just because the names have to be correct. Doesn't matter what it is at the end, but it has to be correct. Now that we've got this, we can press play and make sure that this is all working by going to Chrome and refreshing. This seems to be fine. Going to a different post. This seems to be fine still. So all our changes here are working. Remember to stop your app, minimize that, and we can do a short review of what we just looked at. All that we've done is added this error page. So if the post was not found, and we're returning a different template entirely, and we're passing it this short message. Now, we've also created a base Ginger file, which is all the HTML scaffolding plus this special block syntax. In any child that extends that file, we then have this block again, and we can include any HTML we want inside that block, and it will replace the contents in base.ginger2. Make sure to spell these blocks correctly, block should be lowercase b, you should have these tags opening and at the end. Some of my students insist on typing block with a capital B. That won't work. It has to be lowercase b. This here, though, the content block, is essentially a name, so you can call it whatever you want. You can put whatever you want inside content. You can call it something else if that makes more sense to you. You could call it block body, for example, if that makes more sense to you. And that's it. That simplifies our code greatly and allows us to give the users this nice error message. That's it for this video, and I'll see you on the next one.
You listen to me and you listen well. Are you behind on your credit card bills? Is your landlord ready to evict you? Does your girlfriend think you're a fucking worthless loser? Good. I want you to deal with your problems by becoming rich.
Hi and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be creating our first HTML form, which is going to allow our users to create new posts in our in-memory database. In order to do that, we're going to create two new Flask endpoints. Let's go over down here and create the first one, which is going to be very simple. It's going to give the users the form that they can fill in. So we're going to do app.route/post/form. And then here we're going to define a function that is going to return render template of create.ginger2. This is going to be a file that we're going to give our users, which is going to contain the fields that they can fill in order to create a new post. Let's go and do this first. We always want to go step by step when we do software development. We want to do this, make sure it works, and then we can move on to the next bit. If you implement everything together and then try to see if it works, you may find that it's not so easy to realize where the problem lies. So going step by step, always a good idea. Let's go ahead into our templates, create a new file, which is going to be called create.ginger2. And in here, we're going to do the usual extends base.ginger2, and then a block of content there. And inside this block, we're going to put our form. The first thing is a wee title, just so the user knows where they are. Then we're going to include our form. Okay. And inside a form, we're going to include a div. A div in HTML is just a horizontal block. So if you have two divs, for example, this one here, and then this one here, they will appear one below the other, as opposed to one beside the other. So it's a good way of separating content in HTML. It doesn't really do anything on its own, but it's a good way of separating content. And the content we're going to separate is the different fields. First thing we're going to do is add a label, and the label is going to be for this title field. And the title field is going to be here, input, type, text, and the name is going to be title. Notice how the label has an opening tag and a closing tag, and inside it you put what you want to go in the label. But the input field doesn't have anything inside it because it's a blank field, so you get what's called a self-closing tag. You get a tag that has this weird syntax where it's only a single tag, but it has this / at the end. This is called a self-closing tag, a tag that closes itself. The name of the field is what this for is going to target. So this tells HTML users that this label is for this field. Of course, when you see the text title beside a field, you know that that title is for that field. But if you're blind and you're using a screen reader, you may not see the contents of the label, but the screen reader will be able to look at this for property and tell you that this input field is a title. So it's always a good idea to have these fors. They're for screen readers, not for the rest of us, but it's a good idea nonetheless. Then in the other div, we're going to include a field for the contents of the post. So we're going to do label for content, like that. And then instead of an input type text, which is a single line text field, we're going to use a text area. A text area is just a multi-line field, like that. And a text area does have to close like that. It shouldn't be a self-closing tag. This is just another type of input which can span multiple lines. And finally, we're going to include a final div, which is going to be an input of type submit. An input of type submit essentially is a button that the user can press. And when the user presses the button, they're going to send the data of the form to the server. Now that we've got this, let's go over to our app, run it, and see what happens when we access this endpoint. Let's go over to Chrome and access post/form, and you get this nice looking form. Okay, I'll give you that. It's not terribly pretty, but nonetheless, it is functional. You can put in your title here, like my first blog post, and the content can be, hello, how are you doing? Then you can submit, and now look at what happens to the URL. The URL has changed, right? Now it has all of this stuff here. But it seemed like it loaded something. Now the fields are blank, but the URL has changed. So how to explain this? Well, what's happening is the form is sending the data to a page. That page can then choose to use that data or not. What happens is when you press submit, the browser sends another GET request to this URL, /post/form, and it includes behind that this that is called a query string parameter. Okay? This question mark title equals something and content equals something else. But because our Python code here, when you access this endpoint, only renders a template, it doesn't use the data that it received in the query string parameters, it is unable to do anything with them, and all that happens is we re-render the template and we don't use that data at all. We're going to stop the app again because we're going to restart it momentarily, but what we're going to do is, instead of sending the data to this endpoint, we're going to send the data to a different endpoint. So here in the form, we're going to say action equals /post/create. Okay? Instead of /post/form, now it's going to go into /post/create. And we can create that endpoint. App route /post/create. Create post. And this, I'm actually just going to call it create just to keep it simple. This is going to access that data that's coming through the URL. Remember, this here is 107.15000 /post/create (title equal blah blah and content equal something else). Yeah? We can access this stuff here. We can retrieve the title and the content. So let's do just that. Inside our create function, we're going to say title is request.args.get title. And we have to import request from Flask. So let's go to the very top and say import request. This request thing here is a variable, it's like a global variable, is the request that is coming into this endpoint. So the request right now is this, and it has some arguments, which are these. And you can get a particular argument in order to retrieve its content. Essentially, Flask behind the scenes, it's turning this into a dictionary, and that's request.args. Then you can get a particular thing in that dictionary, and we'll give you the content of that. Similarly, we can do content equal request.args.get content. Then we can generate a new post ID, which is going to be len of posts. And finally, we can say posts post ID equal title is going to be the title and content is going to be the content. Like that. Now is a good point in time to make sure to also include an ID for the post in the body of the post. Like that. Just so when you access a particular post, you'll also have access to its ID. It's a useful thing to include in every post. So we're going to go up here and also include that here. Okay, just a good thing to include in order to have the complete information when you do retrieve a post. Now that we've added this new post to our posts, we can return the user something else. So again, all this does is it accesses these arguments using request.args and gets a title and the content that came from the form, generates a new post ID, and then puts it into our dictionary. For example, if we create a new post and pass it some values here, len of posts will be 1 because we've got one post right now. And what we'll do is we'll say posts1 equal this new post. And at the end, we're going to say return, and here's a bit more complicated, redirect URL for post ID equal post ID. So a couple of things are going on here. The first thing is this URL for. The URL for, which we're going to import in just a moment, the URL for takes in a function name. Takes in the function name and returns a URL, an address that we want. In this case, it takes the post function name, which is this function defined up here, and it's going to give us this URL. Instead of hard coding the URL in here directly, we can use the URL for, and that way we can change this later on if we want. For example, let's say we want to change it to, posts / something. This will still work because we've not changed the function name. So Flask recommends using this URL for in order to generate URLs instead of hard coding them. And it also allows us to give the arguments that it needs. So the post URL needs a post ID in order to be complete, and we can do that inside the URL for function. The redirect is wrapping this URL for, and what it does is it sends a response back to the browser, telling the browser that it should actually not load this page. It should go and load this page instead. So essentially the browser loads this, and then it receives this information, and then it goes and loads the other thing. Browsers are already wired up to understand this, and so that's why it works. You can send the browser to go to somewhere else and they'll do it. Okay, let's go up and import those two. We want to import URL4 and redirect. And now when we create a new post, we pass it in the title and content, we add it to our database, and then we send the user to the post page for that specific post. So as soon as you create a post, you'll be sent back to the post page that you've just created. Let's go and run our app and try this out. So what we're going to do is we are going to delete this query string parameter. We're going to refresh this page, and now we're going to enter something here. My first blog post, and hey, what are you reading? And then submit, and as soon as submit happens, you know what's going to happen. The URL is going to change. We're going to send a request to /post/create. That's going to process this function here, add something to our database, and then it's going to redirect us to /post/1. Let's press submit, and there you have it. And it happens so quickly you can't even see it because there's really nothing much happening in the background. But this has now been added to our database. You can see we're in /post/1, and our new post contents have appeared here. So this is starting to get really cool. Now we can get information from our users, add it to a database, send them to other places, display information, and so forth. I hope you're starting to see the power of what Flask can do. I really love Flask, and I'm really passionate about developing Flask applications because it's so simple, and it's all Python. All that's happening here is this. This is what Flask gives you, really. This routing, access to the request, rendering templates. The rest, databases, all your business logic in terms of creating new posts and so forth, is all Python. And that gives you a lot of flexibility. There are other web frameworks apart from Flask that can be a bit more complex to use, such as Django. They require a bit more upfront knowledge, but Flask does not. That's why I'm really liking how Flask works. And this is what I do at my job and in many other courses as well. So this was the end of the video. Just wanted to show you how to send the user to a post they've just created and how to create new posts. We're going to move over to the next video to add posts in a slightly different manner. I'll see you there.
I've worked hard for a long time, and it's not about winning, but what it's about is not giving up. If you have a dream, fight for it. There's a discipline for passion, and it's not about how many times you get rejected or but you fall down or you're beaten up. It's about how many times you stand up and are brave and you keep on going. Thank you.
Hi and welcome back. Did you know it's fairly trivial to see what addresses somebody is accessing on their browser if you're connected to the same Wi-Fi network as somebody accessing them? So if you were in a coffee shop and you were accessing this page here, somebody else in the coffee shop connected to the same Wi-Fi network might quite easily be able to see what you are accessing. So why is that important? Remember, when we create a new post, what we're doing is something like this. We're accessing this page /post/create with these query string parameters. This is all part of the address. As I say, it's fairly trivial to see these in the things you're accessing when you're connected to the same network. So obviously for a title and some content, maybe it doesn't matter that somebody else reads it. But say you're sending a username and a password, maybe it starts to matter a bit more that they're being sent in this way as the address, as opposed to in maybe some more hidden and more secure way. So in this video, we're going to look at that more hidden and more secure way that is a little bit less easy to see. Let's go over to PyCharm, and instead of using request.args, request.args here, we're going to be accessing a hidden payload that comes through in the request. This hidden payload will be called request.form. Okay, the rest stays the same. Instead of accessing the query string parameters, we're going to be accessing the request's form data. This is some hidden data that is included when you send a form using HTML. But of course, the address is still going to be this. So we don't want the address to be this. We want the form to not send data in this format. Instead, we want the form to send data as a hidden payload. And that is fairly simple. If we go over to create.jinja2, all we have to do is say method is post. When you do method is post, now the form is going to package up this information and is going to attach it to a hidden payload in the request and send it through that. That's because according to internet standards, the GET request cannot have data payloads, but the POST request can. So when you use POST, the form attaches the data to that payload instead of putting it in the address bar. There are a few other benefits, like the amount of information you can send is much greater. There's a limit to the number of characters in a URL. So if you attach it using POST, you can send much more data, much lengthier data. And also, it's more secure. This endpoint here, though, is only geared up to accept GET requests. If you want to accept a POST request that has that hidden payload of data, you must tell Flask that you want to link this route up with a way to access POST requests. That's really straightforward. All you have to do is say methods equal this list here with the POST string inside it. Now what we've done is we've told Flask that this route here will only receive POST requests. If you try to access it with a GET request, you'll now get an error and it will say, hey, you didn't say you wanted to access this with GET requests, you can only do POST requests. And that's it. Now when we run our app and we go back to Chrome and we go over to the the form, see, this is what you get if you access it using a GET request. If you go over to the form, you'll see this. And my second post, hi there. And when you submit, you get back here and everything works. And I promise you, even though it was too quick for us to see, there was nothing sent as query string parameters. So now we can delete this from there. Nothing was sent as query string parameters. Now they're being sent, as you can see here in the logs, as a POST request instead of a GET request. And the form data is hidden in there. A little bit safer, but of course there are still more security implications you have to think about. Just sending things via POST isn't safe enough. Just a little bit better than sending them via GET. That's it for this video. I wanted to show you how to do that. Accessing things in the form is very useful. So I'll see you in the next one.
No consideration of failure. Just never even considering the thought of failing. Like if I want something, I just go until I get it.
Hi and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be simplifying our Flask code a little bit by allowing our endpoint here to both give the user the form and receive the data. So it's just going to be a little bit nicer, fewer routes for users to access, and just generally a bit easier to navigate. What we're going to do is we're going to do two things. We're going to allow this endpoint to see GET requests as well. Now, the browser does GET requests. The form does POST requests. So we know that if we get a request that is GET, that's the browser wanting to load the page and probably the user wanting to see the form. If we receive a POST request, we know that's the form sending us data, and therefore we should deal with that form data. So, if the request method is POST, we're going to do all of this stuff. Get the title from the form, get the content from the form, create a new post, and then redirect the user to the posts. As soon as we return, you know this from general Python knowledge, as soon as we return anything, the function ends. So if we have another return down here, this return will only execute if we did not execute this one. And we will always execute this one if the request method is post. So if the request method is not post, we will jump right to this return. That means that if the browser makes a GET request, we are going to render the template. If we receive a POST request from the form, we're going to deal with that data. Now we no longer need /post/form because this endpoint can do both. And it's just a little bit simpler to have the same endpoint dealing with both serving the way of creating data as well as dealing with that data input. Our create.jinja2 also has to change so that this action here can now be removed. If you remove the action, that means use the current page that you're at. And because the current page is the page that serves the template, is also the page that takes in the data, we don't need an action there. This also simplifies things, because if you move this form around or you change the URLs or anything like that, things could break before, but now because it's the same page, both giving the form to the user and accepting the form's input, it's just a bit more stable. And so this way here simplifies your code a little bit, makes it a bit easier to work with, and also reduces the amount of code you've got. All good things. So that's it for this video. Wanted to show you how to do this, and I'll see you on the next one.
I brought a girl child from the street, and I could see in the face of the child that the child was hungry. God knows how many days they had not eaten. So I gave her a piece of bread. I said to the child, eat the bread. And she looked at me and said, I'm afraid to eat the bread because I'm afraid when it is finished, I will be hungry again. This is a reality.
Hi there and welcome back. In this video, I wanted to show you how to create a nice homepage for your blog so that you don't just get hello world when you arrive here. We're going to show your blog and also a list of the posts that are available in your blog right now for people to read. Let's go and do that. Going back over to PyCharm, we're going to stop our app and close it down. And then instead of returning hello world here, we're going to return render template. And what we're going to render is home.jinja2. And to this home.jinja2, we're going to pass the posts that we currently have available in our in-memory database, which is this dictionary. So we're going to say posts equal posts. Now we have this template that will have access to all our posts, so we can go and create it and then make it do what we want it to do. So the first thing to do, extends base.jinja2 and then the block content. Make sure to not leave any spaces in end block and to spell all these things correctly using lowercase letters. Then we can in here put what we want our homepage to be like. This, by the way, is something I really love about the development workflow with Flask. You define your route, what your users are going to access, and then with a simple function that just renders a template and give it some information, you can go and create a template that shows the user exactly what you want. So in this case, we're going to say h1, welcome to your blog. And then we're going to do h2, posts. And now we're going to put in an unordered list. An unordered list in HTML is just a bullet point list. And in here, we're going to put an li tag for our first post. So we're going to say A is, the li tag is a list item. The A tag is an anchor tag, a link. The href is the URL that this link goes to, or the endpoint. So /post/0. Then in here, we're going to type in post 1, for example. Then we're going to close the A tag, close the li tag. When users go to our homepage now, they're going to see this big title, slightly smaller title, and then some bullet points with one element in the bullet points, which is a link to the first post that exists. Let's go and run our app and then go back to here and refresh it. I misspelled that. I didn't notice that. We can rename it. Homa.ginger2. Home.ginger2. There we go. Remember to stop your app, restart it. There you have it. That was mildly anticlimactic, did not spot that. Welcome to your blog, and then posts, slightly smaller font, and then you have your first post here. You can click on it, goes to your post. Great stuff, except if we go and add a new post, and we go back to the home page, it's not there. Of course, it shouldn't be there. Our home page, we can stop the app by the way. Our home page is only rendering this list here. This list doesn't depend on our posts at all. It's just a static HTML content. We've not told it to, have one of these for each post or anything like that. So let's do it. In Jinja 2, you actually have for loops as well, and they look extremely similar, the same basically, to Python loops. But in Jinja, you have to start with these curly brace %, then you can say for post ID, post in posts.items. This is us iterating over a dictionary. And then at the end of the for loop, you have to type this end for. Normally in Python, you would have a colon, and then you have some indentation. And then at the end of the indented block, Python would know you've reached the end of the for loop. But Jinja does not know that because HTML doesn't care about indentation. So that's why you have this for loop and then this end for. Whatever goes inside here doesn't have to be indented, but I just like it better. Will repeat once for every posts.items. Remember, when you do posts.item, you get the post ID and the post content. So here, instead of this href, we can do something a bit more complicated, which is URL for. You can use Flask's URL for here to generate a link to the post page, passing in the post ID parameter that it needs. And of course, the value of that post ID is the ID inside our dictionary. Instead of post 1, we can have post title. There. So this is looking slightly uglier, but all that's happening here is we have this href, which is the URL that we're linking to, and that is this. This in Jinja 2 is going to get replaced for the URL that takes us to this function, and that takes in a post ID, which we're getting from our iteration. Inside the A tag, which starts here and ends here, we have the post title as something else that the Jinja template is going to replace. So we're going to see for each post a link to it and the post title being linked. Let's start our app again and go over to Chrome. We're going to refresh. Now you can see that the first post is called Hello World because that's the title of our first post in our database. If we go and create a new post, we go to that page, then we can delete this stuff there and go back to the home page. And now you have another item in your list. Of course, if you stop and start the app again, that will be gone because this is an in-memory database. It doesn't persist between executions. But if you've done the earlier sections of this course, you know how to replace this for a SQLite database, for example. So it could be that straightforward. Instead of retrieving and saving things to this dictionary, you could retrieve them and save them from a SQLite database, and now you've got yourself a pretty stable blogging platform in there. And of course, there are countless websites to develop. Some that exist already, some that do not exist already. Use your imagination and feel free to develop anything you want. Of course, there's much more to learn about Flask and about web development as a whole. How to style your pages a bit nicer, how to use JavaScript to include user interactions in pages. There are more things to learn about Flask, like how to log users in and how to, remember them when they come back and so forth. This course is not meant to give you an in-depth explanation on Flask, but it is a subject I feel really passionate about, and I think really it's a great thing to know in today's world of technology. Websites are everywhere, And if you are interested in learning about web development, then it's a great place to start. Hopefully this was interesting, and I'll see you on the next video.
If you truly believe in something and you really have a passion for something, then go for it. I think there's a lot of obstacles that you have to go through, and nothing's ever given to you, and it takes a lot of hard work and dedication, but if you really believe in it, then you should do it.
Hi and welcome back. Something that really bugs me about our application is that once you're in a post, you can't go back to the home page unless you press the back button. Similarly, you can't really easily create a new post unless you type the URL yourself, /post/create. And even when you're here, you can't go back to the home page either. So it's always a good idea to add some proper navigation to your pages, just so your users and yourself can go through them a bit easier. Let's go over to PyCharm and do this just now. I'm going to stop the app, first of all, and minimize that. And in order to add the links, all we have to do is think about where we want to put them. Personally, I think that every page should have a link to the home page. So I'm going to add the link to the home page inside base.html. This block content will be replaced by the child's content every page. So if you put something in here, it won't be present in any of the pages. Just because, when you have home.jinja2, for example, this is going to replace this. It's not going to add to it. So if you want to put something in every page, put it outside of the block of content. All we're going to do here is add a URL to the home page. And I think you can do this. Add a new anchor tag, add the href, and make it point to the URL 4 of the home page. Try that out. Pause the video and give it a go. I'm sure you managed. All that to do is create a new a tag, give it an href of URL 4 and the home page in here. Then close the tag and type in home, for example. Notice how the href needs these quotation marks around it because the href contents have to be inside quotation marks for HTML. This here will be replaced by the URL or the endpoint of your home function, this one. If we run the app now, and we go back to Chrome, and we refresh, we can see that we've lost a blog post, first of all, but we have this home there. If we go into a specific post, that home is still there. Something that isn't there, though, is the ability to create a new post. I think that creating a new post should only be in the home page. So let's stop our app, minimize that and go over to the home page, and down below, add another link. Once again, I think you can do this. Hopefully you got that. In order to create a new post, all we have to do is again the same. So create an a tag, which is an anchor tag, in the href type URL 4, and then here the name of the function that will give you your create.jinja2. That's the create function, so let's go there. It doesn't need any arguments. Any arguments could go here after a comma, but it doesn't need any because it doesn't take any parameters. That's it. Oh, press something too many times there, and then type create post, create new post, for example, close the a tag, and that's it. Again, we can run our app, go over here, refresh, and now we can see this create new post thing there. So now we've got a bit of a nicer navigation there that we can navigate our page without having to type out the URLs ourselves. I want you to realize these are just building blocks. You've got your links, you've got your p tags, your lists, and a few things in Flask like URL 4, redirects, render templates, the ability to show information, and there are countless things you can do with this knowledge already. Granted, the website could look a bit nicer. You want to look at CSS for that. This is not the course for that because this is not a web course. But if you want to look at CSS for styling the page, make it look a bit nicer, add some color, add different font sizes, maybe not put everything just on the left of the page, maybe put things centered in the middle or something like that. You can learn about that, and it's actually fairly straightforward to do some simple but nice looking websites. And now with Python, you can do a lot of stuff. You know Python pretty well by now. You can, store things in a database and do countless other things in terms of giving the user information and calculating things. Hopefully, this opens new doors for you in terms of communicating with your users. I hope you've enjoyed this section, and I'm glad to guide you through Flask development. I'll see you in the next video.